All right. Welcome to the 10th. Hard to believe we've done 10 episodes already in season 5.
It is.
Welcome to the 10th episode of 3L Goalies, ladies and gentlemen, all three of you listeners. As we start every show, we have 3 disclaimers. Number 1, this is an opinion show. These are our opinions. You can't have them. We're old guys, okay? Just because we say it doesn't mean it's concrete, so don't send us any comments. Number 2 is we're old and we've been around a long time and we get frustrated, so sometimes we get crusty when we're talking. We apologize for that. If you've got virgin ears, parents, perhaps you don't want your kids to listen to this. And the most important thing is, and everybody rags me on this, it's like, EV, you call them goalies and they're goalkeepers for soccer. It's like, you know what? We know that. Okay, we know that. Okay, so A, it's our opinion. B, whatever. And 3, goalies sounded better than 3-0 goalies. So we went 3-0 goalkeepers. So we went 3-0 goalies. All right, got to deal with that. So anyway, I'm joined tonight with our other engine, Greg Deutsch. Check out Greg. Go to soccervillage.com. And our special guest tonight, Micah Bledsoe, who is he's I wouldn't classify Micah as an old goalie yet, but you know, he's entered the orbit. Okay. He's entered the gravitational pull. Let's put it that way. So he's getting closer to the Death Star every day. So we're thrilled to have him. He's the goalkeeper coach at Florida State University. If you don't know anything about women's soccer, by the way, they're studs. They're the best. They won the national championship 2 years in a row, right, Micah?
Just the last year.
Just the last year.
2 out of the last 3. 2 out of the last 3.
2 out of the last 3. Yeah. In today's world, that's called a dynasty. You know, again, I don't want to, upset anybody, but 2 out of 3 is a dynasty. So, but he's joining us today to talk goalkeeping, and we couldn't ask for a better guest. And Coach Ryan is on his way back. He's our producer, as everybody knows, and he's managing to do this remotely. That's pretty technical. Bone, you and I, there's no way we could do this. You'd be totally like, yeah, agree. Okay, totally yeah. I have trouble turning the computer off, so yeah. So.
You do. That is funny.
Yeah, I do, man. So every time I FaceTime with Hannah, our daughter, and I don't know why she FaceTimes us, but at the end of every one, I'm like, Marcia, how do you turn this thing off? So, okay. So without further ado, Micah, thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Greg Deutsch, and as you probably know, Micah, he's the Mike Wallace of soccer. So get prepared for some questions you didn't expect. So, all right, here we go.
All right, EV. Well, EV, you know him obviously because he was in your hometown. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay, so he played at Lipscomb. We'll get there in a few seconds. So, Micah, obviously, goalkeeper coach for Florida State. You never dreamed that, I'm sure, when you were, playing at Lipscomb and having a cup of coffee with some of the pro teams. I can't wait to hear, how that came about, sort of out of nowhere, and how your sister got involved. So that's a pretty good story. Evie, just a few things here. You mentioned 2 out of 3. It's their 5th time overall FSU winning it. 2014, 2018, 2021, 2023, 2025. So the 3rd title in 5 years. Their staff was United Soccer Coaches Staff of the Year, obviously, for winning it. Yeah. What's interesting, I find, Mike, and I haven't seen this in any other program yet. 10 support staff. Like,
2-to-1 ratio.
It's like, I get the athletic trainer, I get the video guy or woman, I get the assistant there, but it's like, go talk about this.
Micah, you don't have an assistant goalkeeper.
I don't know who's all listed on the website. We do have a lot of a big support staff that helps out for sure. You mentioned assistant goalkeeper coach. We do have an analyst who he does have a goalkeeping background. He's not an assistant goalkeeper coach, but he comes out and he helps with filming and helps with service. So
how cool would it be to have an assistant goalkeeper coach? Bone. Set
That's
up
a
the
team
cones. I'll be over there in 5 minutes. I'm finishing my Starbucks, and then I'll run the session. Then you can pick up the cones, and oh, by the way, videotape it and cut it so I can yell at the goalkeepers. That'd be great.
Is that what happens though? Like, does that guy do that? Does that guy do that?
Oh, no.
Okay. All right. All right. Just making sure. But I've never seen, like I said, usually, you get your, assistant coach, associate coach, director of operations. You guys got one of those. I mean, it's just what resources at your hands, right? I mean, anything you want is right there.
Now, I'll say going back to the, even going back to the Mark Corian days, this program was ahead of the curve on a lot of analytics stuff. So there's always been a lot of like GAs around the program, even volunteers helping out in that department, and we've continued that. So that's where you see a lot of the the additional student managers and analysts and that kind of sort. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I remember, and maybe I don't think it was a rumor. Maybe you can straighten it out here. He would be able, or that staff would be able to watch any game in the country. I mean, they had all these, satellites going and videotapes going. You're smiling, so there must be a little truth. Maybe talk a little bit more about that.
By the time I got here, I think they, cleaned out a little bit of the archives, but there was, a lot of archived game footage of FSU, but other teams as well, on DVD tapes and all that. So it does not surprise me. I don't have any more info on that, but I'm not surprised.
I don't know, Senator. I do not know that at all.
Yeah. All right. So this is your second season there. Obviously, a lot of success. So let's, start back in the, Cincinnati days. You played for St. Xavier High School, which is a good soccer, program, as well, of course, as academically as, one of the best. What was your career like, and how did you get to Lipscomb?
Yeah, good question. So, really, I think back to the background. I was thinking about this earlier today, right? I didn't get into very seriously into soccer until high school, and really probably the first, goalkeeping exposure I had was probably Great Deutsch Goalkeeper Camp, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember my sisters brought me along there. I was probably going into freshman year would have been my first one, and really kind of got immersed in that. And really was in high school that I really dove into soccer full time. And partly that was because at St. X, I realized I probably wasn't good enough to play any of the other sports. So, but anyways, and then was fortunate in Cincinnati. I wasn't on the top club in the town. I played at Kings. We had a good team. We had a couple different teams there, but was fortunate to have some good goalie trainers, right? Obviously Greg here. And then, Brian Shaper, head coach at St. X, right? Played at Xavier. And then also over at Kings, worked with Craig Salvati, who played at Maryland. So it was just around a lot of good coaches. And then, I think also having those sisters who were kind of in it all the time, and then they went off to play in college. And I was like, you know what, maybe this is something that I can do as well. And so a little bit of a late bloomer, maybe in that sense. I also grew a little bit late. But then senior year, I was like, okay, I want to play. I want to play in college. Ended up, again, later in the process, but coming down with 2 offers. And funny enough, I went on visits to both in the same week. It was Belmont and Lipscomb. So right down the road. And just the situation at Lipscomb was pretty good, and decided to go there.
Yeah. What was the impact, in case people forget, let's talk a little bit about your sisters. Obviously, they're twins. One played at Brown, one played at Wake. A lot of success for both of them. Aubrey obviously is playing pro with the NWSL Washington team. Had a few international caps. What was that household like? I mean, obviously, I remember training all 3 of you at certain times, and you talk about competitive. I mean, it was
3 goalkeepers in one family.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the EV. It was funny because they would always wear their hair.
Your poor mom.
They would always.
That's the toughest position.
Yeah, they would always wear their hair the same. they had the same gloves. It was like a joke. Can you figure out my name or not? Which I never could.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, like with those two, to answer the question, what was it like? It was chaos, right? It was chaos. I mean, even through high school, my parents at that time, they were off. My sisters were off in college, so they were gone every weekend going to those games. But so we didn't really get a ton of time training together. I guess you could say until we do stuff in the backyard, but they were busy enough with club and all that. Until after I was playing in college and they were playing in college, and then I was playing professionally and Aubrey was playing professionally. That's where we really got to be training together and really kind of developed more of a friendship. Back when I was younger, it was just chaos.
Yeah. So obviously you got to play, like you said, for Coach Brian Shaper. What was that experience like? Obviously he's a goalkeeper, so he's going to be extra hard on you as well. But obviously the wisdom and expertise he can provide, I'm sure, was very, very meaningful.
Yeah. So he was. That was my senior year. I believe was one of his last years, if not his last year, as the assistant in JV. But he would, and Coach Aarons was the head coach. But then Brian took over shortly after there. But it was great. I mean, because he knew what it was like to play at the highest level. He played at Xavier, had a good career there. May have been a 4-year starter, if not close to a 4-year starter. So yeah, I mean, he was pretty tough on us from a goalkeeping perspective in particular, and he definitely held a pretty high standard.
Yeah. So you go to Lipscomb, you get to play for Charles, and obviously people forget Lipscomb does not have a American football team. So it's like soccer's the big dog there, along with, basketball, of course, is the big dog there. They've had a lot of success getting in the NCAA tournament and doing well. But I mean, people forget how beautiful your field is, the practice field, which I get the only way I could describe it, EV, I mean, because you've been there, it's like in a forest.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like nothing's around there. It's sort of off campus. No students are there for sure. So it's just you and the trees in this beautiful area. So, I mean, Evie, why don't you talk about it first, because you did some training there,
Yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's kind of cool because, like you said, it's not on campus. So you're not, if you're a player there, you're not getting distracted. The only thing you're getting distracted by is it's near a road that's pretty busy. But other than that, it's got trees all around it. It's very European looking, the setting. It's very, if you've seen pictures, for example, of some of the training facilities at Bayern Munich, they're out, there's a field and then there's woods all around it, and it's very similar to that. And Micah can speak to it more, but they do a great job of making sure the grass, everything's good. The lines are painted, the grass is cut where you want it. They've got tons of goals there for all, training activities. I mean, it's really very, very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So Micah, I mean, was that a big decision when you were deciding between Belmont, hey, this practice site versus this practice site, or what was the deciding factors?
Yeah, I think when I saw, and you mentioned the facilities, right? That was a big part of it. Like Lipscomb's facilities are great. I think I had a better opportunity to play there. I was going to be one of 2 keepers in that first year. Belmont, I believe, already had maybe 3. So that was a big part of it. I think financially it was a better offer as well. So a few different things. I think Lipscomb, just because of those facilities, it was so well positioned. I mean, I think it's the best field in Nashville. I don't know. I haven't seen the new MLS fields. I'm sure they're pretty good. Their new training facility. But up until then, I mean, every time the U.S. national team comes into town, they would go to Lipscomb, and they'd train at that game field. Yeah, it was really that whole process. I think it was. I got fortunate to step into a great situation at Lipscomb my freshman year and ended up starting pretty much that whole season as a freshman, which is pretty rare. And I think I definitely wasn't. It may have stretched me a little bit. I would like to say I was ready for it, and I definitely learned a lot in that first year, I'll say.
Yeah. What was your experience like there? I mean, obviously you guys, Charles schedules pretty competitive teams. He's not really gonna not schedule anyone that he doesn't think is going to give him a good game. I mean, he's playing Indiana, he's playing, Kentucky, he's playing all everybody he can. What was that experience like? I mean, you're probably the underdog in a lot of these games on paper, but you guys did pretty well.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think even like those games, because we scheduled some tough games. One game that sticks out in my mind. Remember my sophomore year, we played Xavier at home, and our assistant from the year before, John Michael Hayden, who's now the Louisville coach, he had just left for Xavier, so he was there, and they're ranked in the top 10. I think we were 0-2, right? We start off the year poorly, but then especially as a keeper, you come up on a game like that, and I'm just like, I'm ready. I was so pumped about it. And I just remember that game. We ended up winning 2-1, and I might have had seven or eight saves, and it was one of those games that you stick out and remember. But I think every year what Charles did is what he did so well is that the team got progressively better. And by the time my senior year, we had a very good year. We couldn't quite get over the hump in the ASUN tournament. And then, the next 2 years, actually, after I left, they went to their first 2 NCAA tournaments.
Yeah, right.
And has had some good teams since then as well.
So you're going through your career here, and at what point do you go, hey, I want to coach? You're obviously tell us, you got to play a little pro with USL, Nashville SC, and Louisville City, and then Michigan Stars, which I'm sure you can go into a little bit. I don't think people know what that that whole the NISA group was with Stumpton Athletic as well. So I'm sure you got some good stories here coming up. But you go from playing to some of these adventures, as I would say they were. Tell us, some of the stories here. Before, again, when do you start thinking about, hey, I'm gonna, coach? Because Evie's always saying, play as long as you can play, because the other side is a bitch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my mindset might have been somewhat similar to that, right? I think when I was in college, so my first goalkeeper coaches at Lipscomb were both grad assistant goalkeeper coaches. So I remember when I was playing and thinking, okay, I want to play professionally, but if it didn't work out, that would be a good avenue, right? So I remember thinking that at the time. I didn't get into coaching until my first year as a pro with Louisville City, where our goalkeeper coach there, Tabani Sutu, he set me up with a local club, and I was doing their goalkeeper training. So it felt like a natural thing for me to do, especially when I was playing professionally. I knew it was in the back of my mind. Okay, when I'm done, I would like to get into coaching in some way. And then also it was a natural fit because I finished up training at noon and didn't know what to do with myself the rest of the day, and getting into coaching felt like a natural fit there.
Yeah. So talk about your experiences, with Lou City, Nashville, Michigan Stars, Stumpton Athletic, because the NISA group with the Michigan Stars and Stumpton Athletic, I'm not sure is even around anymore. Am I right? Or what is the current situation there? Right.
I think the league is still around, but they might have gone on hiatus. It's been, the league has been a little bit up and down for sure. Yeah. So I think through the whole of it, right? So I played on 5 teams in 4.5 years, right? I think cup of coffee was the word you used, Greg. I think
I did. That's an EV term, and I'm just exploded with it. In a lot of terms where it works, right?
Yeah, totally. So, my first year, Louisville City came in. actually, I'd been on a couple trials before that, and it didn't work out, and it's pretty late in preseason, and they were looking for a third keeper. So I knew going into it, they're pretty straightforward. Like, it's going to be tough to get on the field, right? But I think that season I learned so much from just what it takes to be a pro, what it takes to show up every day with the right mentality, right? To the right habits on and off the field. And if you look at that team as well, that team ended up winning the USL championship. We won the cup that year, and a lot of guys from that team went on to play MLS. I think there's at least 3 or 4, I believe 4, who went to play MLS from that team, which I think at that time was pretty rare, and it still is pretty rare. Guys making that jump, and then a lot of guys who've had guys who are still playing in the USL from that team. So I learned a lot that season, right? I didn't make any appearances, but learned a lot. The next year, I played with Nashville, which was their inaugural USL season, right? And it was, to be honest, it was kind of a similar situation where I came in as a third. Matt Pickens was the player coach at that time, and did learn a lot from that group. But again, that's two years where I came in, and the closest I got to the field was either in a friendly or being the number 2, right? So I knew I in order to play, I'd have to keep moving around, keep hunting those minutes. The third year, I went to Tormenta FC, which is in USL League One, right? And it was their first year as well as a professional team, right? It was that league's first year overall, right? 2019, the first year of USL League One. And going into it, I was like, this was going to be my chance, right? This was going to be, I knew there's me and one other guy that they brought in, and we were going to kind of battle it out. And then just so happened, right, the way life works, right, that preseason tore my ACL, right? So that was a tough, and again, another massive, right, like all these things that happen. I view everything. It's just like, and again, another thing I talk about with my goalkeepers is like, something happens to you, you can choose to approach a lot of different ways, or you can just choose to grow from it, right? How can you learn from this? So I think I learned so many just things about myself going through that, and important reminder just with all the players that you come across who are going through stuff like that. Like it's a big moment, right? So I missed that whole year, and at the end of the season, they decided to not renew my contract. So that's where I'd gone through. I was like, I'm 3 years into this. I have to keep trying because I haven't even gotten on the field yet, and I have to keep trying. I'm doing my rehab anyway. I had a friend who had gotten on with the team in NISA. Right, this would have been the first year of NISA at Stumptown Athletic in Charlotte. I think I was making maybe $500 a month, right? But went up there, and that team was coached by Mark Steffen, and I think maybe first or second game of the year, I'd made my pro debut, right? And then starting to get this stuff on the news, right? COVID epidemic. So before you know it, that season was over. We had to move out of our apartments, So that's what I moved back to Cincinnati. So at that point, I said, I got a game in. I felt good, and then it kind of became down to, what do I do next? I started coaching a lot in Cincinnati. I started doing some club stuff, and then was looking at getting an accounting job. And then I got a call from another buddy who's up at Michigan, and that's where I made that move, right? And kind of a similar setup. Was the number 2. Ended up getting a couple games there, and felt good about that. And kind of, at this point, I was looking on to what I was going to do next. Knew that I didn't want to work in accounting from that process. And then that's where Charles came calling summer of 21, and offered me the job at Lipscomb to be the assistant and keeper coach.
I was going to say, what was that like? Obviously, you played for him. Now you're going to coach under him. Obviously, you had a good relationship with him as a player, as you alluded to. Mm-hmm. Now you're going to work for him, and you're excited, and you're got some stability. maybe you're thinking you got a path. What did you learn from Charles?
Yeah. I mean, I think going to work for him was, I mean, it was a no-brainer just from what I knew about him as a player, right? Just how much he cared for the players on the team. He's not somebody who's got ulterior motives. He's going to tell you what he thinks. He's a pretty straight shooter. I liked the way he ran the program. It's definitely a player-led program, and I knew stepping in that he'd give me freedom to do things and to try things. I'd also be around people I could learn from. The other assistant on the staff was Stephen Lunny, who he'd coached me for 2 years. But really both of them had coached me. So I knew kind of how they operated, and I knew I had a lot to learn as well. So it was a really good environment for me to be in.
Yeah. Evie, you've known Charles, 20 plus, maybe 30 plus years.
Yep.
And you've been on his staff in and off, or on and off. What do you like about Charles as a coach, guiding these young players? In today's environment, or even back when you started with him, and then to see all the different changes, obviously the foreigners, the portals, all that. So maybe go into a little different dynamics here of that type of question I have.
Yeah, no, I mean, Charles, I think Micah said it best. Charles lets the players lead the team, and I think there's not many coaches that do it that way. He kind of guides them, not from behind, but from beside. And, he's good about just, hey, if you want to be good as a team, this is what you need to do. I'm telling you how to get there. Here's the map. If you follow the map and pay attention to the small details and everything, we'll be okay. If you get to mid-October and decide, this is fun, but it's not a priority, then we're not going to do very well, as a group, because, as we all know, we've all been on teams where it only takes 1 or 2 guys, 3 guys to become complacent, and then, then you're lost. And Charles, what I like about the way Charles coaches, and we need to get him on the show at some point, Bone, but what I like about the way Charles coaches, and I've watched him from when we worked together at Vanderbilt to when he went to that gem of the South, Belmont Abbey, where everybody seems to go through, and then his time at Lipscomb, he does a good job, and he runs a really good program, and he's got as you alluded to earlier, Greg, he's got support from the administration, because they don't have American football. The big sports at Lipscomb are soccer, basketball, as you said, and they have a pretty good baseball team, right, Micah? I mean, they've always been pretty good at baseball, but I mean, and they've got wonderful facilities, and he kind of stays between the lines and has been very successful doing it, and particularly in what you'd have to call a non-soccer state. Because I think he's one of 4 Division I programs in Tennessee. There's Lipscomb, there's Belmont, there's ETSU, and there's Memphis. And they've always done very well.
Okay, there we go. All right. So Micah, you're at Lipscomb, you're doing the goalkeeping training, working yourself you're working your way up, learning this and that, and FSU opens up. What's the first thought from you? Ain't no way. I mean, I don't know anybody there. I mean, how does this work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. A lot of people have asked me that, right? So, I think, foremost, those 3 years I was at Lipscomb, right? We had some good teams, and I love Lipscomb, and would love to stay at Lipscomb my whole life, but just it's a small school, small pool, right? So knew that in order to keep growing, I'd have to leave. So I'd kind of looked at what's going on, and I think it was probably my wife who sent me that one. Florida State's looking for a goalkeeper coach, and I hadn't applied for any jobs on the women's side before, but I was like, hey, they just won the national championship. I'll submit my application, right? So just press submit, and lo and behold, a couple days later, I got a text from Brian Pensky, right? And he reaches out, and we start talking, right? So that's really how it started. That's all how it happened right there. And then, I think through that, I've talked to Brian since then, and he put it together. He knew Aubrey a little bit beforehand, but he didn't put it together that she was my sister until he was typing my number into his phone. He typed 513, typed the next few numbers, and then it's me and her, and he's like, huh, and that's where he put it together. Oh, okay, yeah, they must be related here.
Yeah, that last name didn't have anything to do with it, but the phone number, that sealed it.
Yeah.
Have you told that story to Brian?
Well, Brian's the one who told me that to me. Yeah. It's a
very funny story. So what'd your sister say? She obviously talked to him on your behalf.
Yeah, she sent a message, and Brian, he does his homework. He made a few calls about me, and yeah, I mean, at that time it was Bobby Shuttleworth was on the staff as well, and he was the goalkeeper coach, and he was transitioning into a role with field players, and so I talked to Bobby a lot as well through that whole process, and all kind of shook out within a week. It was spring break, and by the end of the spring break, I was getting ready to pack my bags and go to Tallahassee.
I mean, was this sort of like pinch me, wake me up moment? And your wife obviously is the one who spurs it, and she's like, yeah, well, here we go. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, everything.
Yeah. No, it was a whirlwind.
Sure. I mean, you're going to be the top of the top. Your salary's going to get increased. Cost of living is probably going to go down a little bit. So, I mean, what's going through your head here?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, yes, that wow, it's a great opportunity, but also just what am I getting myself into? Right? I got to figure out. I think I got to learn this team, and I got to get ready to get going. And Brian wanted to get me down there as soon as possible because the spring season was just to finish up, and wanted to get me to know the team a little bit and work with the keepers. So, I'd like to say, my first instinct was just to get down there and get after it, right? I think I mentioned to Bobby, I remember a week into it, it's a little bit of a weird one because I'm here and I'm training the keepers, but he's still down the field, right? So getting to kind of step into that situation, and I learned a lot of things from Bobby, and there were some things like ways that he trained the keepers that they liked, and I had to figure out ways to continue to do those things, but also be authentic to myself and the way I did things. So yeah, it was an experience for sure.
Yeah. So let's take us through this past season here. You guys start off, pretty well, but then you go through a little rough patch. Mid-season, you lose 3 games in a week, literally, which probably hasn't happened in a very long time in that program. You get a tie the next game, and then sort of fix yourselves, and off you guys go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was the 2 losses, right? It was the 2 losses to Notre Dame on the road, right? And we kind of went into that game. It's tough. It's a long season, but also a short season. Non-conference, you're starting to get to know your team. But to be honest with you, we might only have 1 or 2 games that it's in non-conference where you can really see what we're about against the top team, right? Just because the ACC is just a different animal, it's a different beast, right? So we knew, going into a lot of those big conference games, we'd beaten Carolina before that, 1-0 on the road, right? That was a big game. But then, the bump you mentioned, we went on the road to Notre Dame. We're up 2-0 actually in the first half, conceded right before the end of the half, went 2-1, and then gave up 3 goals in the second half, right? So 4-2 final. And then that next week, we played Stanford on Thursday, right? And right, similar game. We were in the game, but just moments that kind of let us down defensively, and we lost that game 2-1. So really, at that point, it was kind of an all hands on deck moment, just because of the standards of the program. Is we're not expected to lose games, and no one wants to lose games, and we've got a lot of talented players, and we got together and we talked about it. We met with the leadership group, and they talked about just how they don't want to lose games anymore, right? they want to win, right? And so it was we talked a lot about our collective defending, right? That was a big emphasis, competing in the air. So I'd say as a team, I did think it brought us together, and then from that point on, we didn't lose another game.
Yeah. To talk about the NCAA tournament, because you're always going to have that game where it's a nail biter, and you're not expecting that one team maybe to be that good, or maybe you guys are off. Go into, that story, because you start off on fire. Of course, you're playing, Samford, not Stanford, until later. So you get a little momentum there, but then, the next 2 games, I'll let you tell the stories.
Yeah. I think, just from a goalkeeper lens as well, I think we should mention, right, we also went through a goalkeeper change in this period as well, right? So had a freshman goalie in the goal after the Stanford game, right? And I think telling the story of the season through that lens as well, right? We had 3 goalkeepers who were all very good, right? We went into the season saying we got 3 number ones, and credit to Brian. He wanted to make sure that they all got chances throughout the beginning, early parts of the season to show their stuff, because they all had trained well enough to be starters. So through that kind of time period, going into that Stanford game, we ended up making a switch, right? We made a couple of switches, but that was one of the ones we made a switch in goal, and at that point on, we went with one of our freshmen in goal, right? So going into the NCAA tournament, we kind of righted the ship a little bit towards the end of the AC. We ended up losing in the ACC tournament in penalty kicks to Virginia in the quarterfinal, 0-0. And then going into Samford, I believe that game ended up 5-0. So just felt we had a good bit of momentum going. From there on, we were the 3 seed, so that means we had to go on the road, right? Not something that we've had to do at Florida State much in the recent history, at least. But went on the road to Georgetown, ended up playing Lipscomb in the second round, and that game was a tough game, right? Because they were a tough team to beat. They just beaten Mississippi State 1-0. I don't think they conceded many goals at all last year. And Obi does a fantastic job, and so went into that game. Ended up winning that game 1-0, but survived some late scares, and they definitely defended pretty well. And then ended up beating Georgetown 3-1 in the Sweet 16. And it's funny because the year before we had lost in the second round in penalty kicks, and Carolina was on our side of the bracket as a 2 seed, and they ended up moving on and getting to play home in the Elite 8. Well, in this past year, Notre Dame was the 1 seed, and they had gone upset in the I believe it was the second round as well, to Ohio State. So that meant that we got to host the Elite 8, and Ohio State was coming to us. And we were playing well at this time. We beat Ohio State 4-1 at home, and that kind of sealed us to make the College Cup.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, like you said, 7 goals in 2 games. I mean, you guys are on fire heading into the College Cup. What are you trying to tweak at this point?
Yeah, I would say it's less about trying to tweak anything, right? Maybe there's some game-to-game adjustments, just some small details, but at this point, it's we figured out our best 11, and I think we'd played. If you look at the year, Brian, he gives players opportunities, and we'd played a lot of players in a lot of those games early on in the year, and at this point, we were starting to figure out what the group was going to be that was going to push us over the line, right? So not a lot of tweaks. We had made the switch in the first round of the tournament. We had a player who came back from the U17 World Cup into fitter in the lineup. Brian had changed the formation to a 4-4-2 diamond, and we'd roll with that the rest of the tournament. And so I think going into the College Cup, not a lot of big changes, just some small tweaks.
So talk about, the semi and then obviously the final here. Very exciting games. TCU, obviously a very formidable opponent.
Yeah, TCU, good team, right? And that was their first College Cup, but they showed up and they were hungry. So that game, we knew going in, they're a team that likes to keep the ball, likes to possess, and they're not gonna sit off. They're gonna try to win it back high up the field. So yeah, going into that game, a little bit of it maybe it's pretty cold there, and we weren't necessarily playing our best soccer, maybe the nerves as well. But we started to get some chances, and then we ended up scoring with maybe about a little over 10 to go, 10 to 15 to go, and ended up holding on from that point. Some nervy last moments for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if
you might want to explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
You said that so calmly over there. Why don't you go into that? A little controversy, as a lot of people say.
Well, you're probably referring to the handball incident, right?
Of course.
Which if you look at the replay, right? Again, I can see how both ways here, but I guess the referee said it hit off the side of the torso, and then redirected onto the arm. And
right
off the referee's rule book, any redirection onto the arm is not a penalty, right?
Correct. Right.
So that's where that one came in, and then in the last 15 seconds, they came down the field. It came from our throw-in, and next thing you know, they've got a 1v1 from a little bit of a wider angle, but a 1v1 with our keeper, and she makes a big save.
Yeah,
right.
huge save. Yeah. All right, so you're meeting Stanford, a little revenge here. What are the thoughts going in? The first time, again, close game, but they beat you. What's the feeling like? You get, and you get 3 days rest here now too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going into that game, we knew Stanford was a good team. So I'd be lying if I said, we knew we were going to win this game, right? But we definitely were eager to play them again. And I think, again, most of the build-up to that team, it was less about the tactics, and this is exactly how. It was more just about, this is what it's going to take to win a national championship, and just talking about our mentality, talking about our approach. And Bobby got up there and shared his experience playing in a cup final with the Revs in front of the team, and that's a lot of stuff we talked about, making sure that we're physically prepared, making sure that we were getting the adequate rest. We weren't training a ton during that time period, right? Making sure that, hey, we could go out there one more 90-minute and give it our best, right? So that was most of the build up to the game. And again, Stanford's a good team. Right? They have a lot of players on that team who were veteran players who were, and I think even going back to, touching back on what we talked about earlier when we played Stanford the first time around and we lost, right? One of the things that our team was struck by was, they were the more mature team in that game. Right, they looked like the more veteran team. They were more. They handled the emotions of the game better. Right, they weathered the storm, and we tried to push for a goal late in that game. Right, so I think we learned a little bit from that game, but knew that Stanford was going to be a tough team, and I think the final reflected that. It was they had their chances early on for sure, but we hit them on the counter a few times in that first half, and it was end to end in that sense. And then I think we made some adjustments. We did switch in that final to a 4-2-3-1 just to combat their shape, and in the second half ended up being more of a pretty balanced game, and ended up putting a chance away off a corner kick, just kind of a jammy play. It was 3 or 4 volleys that kept it alive, and ball put back across the box, and our forward Ree Hudson was in the right spot to put it away. So
yeah,
that was 3 minutes left, and then we held on for dear life those last 3 minutes.
Yeah. Now, EV, I don't think we've had anyone on the program, but when you win a national championship, you get to go to the White House.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so tell us about that experience, Micah. I mean, this is a once in a lifetime. Well, maybe not, if you're there a while and they keep winning, but what, share with everyone here what that moment was like.
Yeah, I think it's always great. Like when your team wins and you get recognition, and we got recognized. Obviously, from the White House, we got recognized. I mean, around Tallahassee when we came back after that championship, you would have thought we were, we were the main thing in town, right? I mean, we were the main thing in town during that time period. Going to City Hall, going to the, Tallahassee's the capital of Florida, so we went to visit the capital of Florida. Went in and sat in on one of the state legislator sessions. So, there was a lot of cool things that we got to experience in that time period after, for sure.
Yeah, amazing. So, you're on top of the world as far as number one. Obviously, the portal plays a lot to what Brian and the program are doing. How's it affecting you as far as in the goalkeeping? You have shared with me, last year, you had 3 goalkeepers. Now you're nervous about this year with just 2. Brian seems to think, okay, but you're on pins and needles with this. And I would be too, especially, at a program like that. So what's the feeling here moving, toward the upcoming season in the fall? And I'd like to hear your comment about the extended season. EV, the women get 2 weeks earlier. So they're going to start July 15th.
Okay.
Which is the earliest they've ever done. They will end the second week in December, which normally they did the first week. So they've sort of expanded it. It appears, I think, Micah, correct me if I'm wrong, there'll be only 6 weeks where you have to play 2 games that week. The rest will be 1 because of the extension.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, July 15th just seems like, they just got done, here in May, and then boom, 45 days later, hello, you better be here. Or maybe they're just staying there, right, to take a class that's probably easier.
Yeah. To your first one, right, the goalkeepers. Yeah, I mean, I think it all depends on who you have, right? We feel like we've got 2 keepers we like, right? So it makes it a little bit easier rolling into the season. And then I think the extended season, right? Obviously, you saw the guys, right, in 27, I believe. They're
2028.
2028, okay. So in 28, they're moving to that full calendar year. So I think this decision to extend it to July 15 was not a move in that direction, but in the interest of having a longer ramp up for preseason, less midweek games, like you said. I know us at Florida State, we don't mandate our players stay all summer. I know some different programs do different things. Some choose to stay because they're maybe at a certain spot in their return to play, or just trying to work on something and get more fit with our strength coach. But most of them go on and go, do whatever they need to do. So I think from a ramp up standpoint, I like it because the preseason, as it's been, just the more we learn about, the sports science side of things, doesn't make sense from what you're trying to fit into a 2-week period to then be ready to play two games a week. So I like it from that standpoint. And I think it will allow you to maybe not to ramp up your training and hopefully lead to less injuries for by and large for cross NCAA.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about, obviously, when you're recruiting a goalkeeper to play at Florida State, what is the must-haves that when you're looking, they better be able to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say first thing would be ability to keep the ball in the net, and that a lot of that will come from just the physical profile, right? How athletic are you? Are you able to cover the goal, right? And I think that's the big thing, or that's the main thing. Goalkeeping, I think, will always be that will always be the main thing. And I think on the women's side, maybe more. I would say I maybe would answer this a little bit different back at Lipscomb when I was with men's. But on the women's side, I think there is being a good shot stopper. The levels between an elite shot stopper and a good shot stopper are wider. So I think it's such an important part.
Do you feel their ability to play with their feet is going to separate them for you when you're watching that keeper, put them in, this category over here versus, they can't play, or where's a priority playing with their feet?
Yeah, it's important. It's important for sure. And if you want to go on and you want to play professionally, if you want to play with the, national teams, you need to play with your feet. It's important for sure. Now, where I would rank it, I do think it's still a thing that goalkeepers can improve on, even in the college game. So would it be a deal breaker if someone was not the best, if they can't play every single pass out of the back, and I'm watching them at the club level? No, I would not say that'd be a deal breaker. So I think it's important, and it's continuing to grow in importance. But I do think it's something that, if you spend a lot of time in training, you can make a lot of gains in that, especially if that's not something that maybe they're doing a lot in their club environment.
Yeah. Another area that I think definitely separates them, I'm curious to hear yours, especially coming from the men to the women, dealing with high balls and crosses, right? The men's game, a lot more of it. Got to read it, I think, a little bit better, more physical, of course, I think. At times it's because bigger, stronger players. That doesn't mean the women aren't strong or physical. It's just that they're not dealing with, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guys, like that. What's your take on, again, the women? And it seems like in club ball, you don't see a lot of practice of it, right? In training sessions. I mean, you get to see this, quite a bit, or maybe you don't. What's your take on dealing with crosses here, in high balls?
Yeah, I'd probably put that next behind shot stopping, as far as how important it is for the game, for the college game, and women's in particular. I think I watch a ton of NWSL, right? I would say that I watch a ton of NWSL, and that's really started since Aubrey's been in the league. And so when I made this jump into the women's side, I was like, I didn't watch a lot of women's college. I didn't watch a lot of women's club, but I watch a lot of women's pro. And so coming to Florida State, I knew what that looked like. I knew what pro looked like, right? So, and I knew what Florida State had been producing was that level. So, and watching the NWSL, all those goalkeepers are pretty good in the air, right? They've all came through college environments where they were very good, where they were typically one of the best, say, in their conference respectively, and then now they've gone on. So I think when you look at the college game, there are still some programs where maybe that would be a weakness of their goalkeeper. So again, I think it's something that you can work on if you have a good base of athleticism, and you can read the flight of the ball, and then if you've got the right position, starting position, the right mentality, it's something that you can improve on. But you have to have the right physical tools to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here thinking from you and again, Brian's standpoint, as far as recruiting, you're able to get, any player you want in the country or even internationally. How is that playing out? I mean, is there really, you mentioned, you alluded to, sort of being I don't want to say a pro factory, but you have a lot of players that go on to the next level. in the NWSL or internationally. You got quite a bit going, overseas. Is it the expectation that high when players are being recruited? They're like, hey, we know we're going to get a chance to go pro. That's why we're going here. Or is it more, hey, I'm going to have a great chance to win a national title? I'm sure it could be a combination of both. But again, with the array of talent that you guys have and can attract, I'm just wondering how the thought process is.
Yeah, I'd say a combination of those for sure. I think if you look at the pro world right now with no draft, players can sign at any time, right? We had 3 kids who were supposed to start in January who ended up signing contracts in the NWSL this past fall, right? So that right away, okay, now we need to go find three players to fill those spots.
Right.
So, and that's the way it is right now, and it's great because the players have more freedom. They can sign where they want, right? They can sign when they want. So it's good for them in some ways. But we have to sell our players every year, and we have to make sure that we're putting out a team that can compete for championship every year. So there is still that piece of players that recognize that the college game is a good opportunity to improve. Still get valuable minutes in an environment that, yes, it's a performance environment. We're trying to win national championships, but also maybe not quite as ruthless as the pro world is.
Interesting, that last comment. Yes. All right, EV. Wow, some pretty interesting information here tonight.
Oh yeah, and isn't it a wonderful thing now that women's players have something beyond college to aspire to if they want to.
Yeah.
You're always going to have that kid who's a good soccer player who wants to go pre-med, and she's like, I want to be on the team, I want to win a national championship, but I'm going to med school afterwards. Fair enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they have a something to shoot for if they want to beyond trying to win a national championship in college is wonderful. I mean, it's great. And, I think that has changed, in our lifetime, Bone, because when I was coaching, you played in college. If you were a female, you played in college. That was it. There wasn't even anything to really try to go to. There wasn't a USL for women. There wasn't, there wasn't an A league for women. It was just, you played in college, and so that evolution has been wonderful, I think. But as Micah said, and we've said this several times on the show, there is a terrible beauty to professional soccer. All right. And it is, you either win or you don't. And if you don't, you're gone. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's just simple. And that's exacerbated if you're a goalkeeper, right? Because there's only one goalkeeper. So, you can move outfield players around, as we all know, but if you're a goalkeeper and you can't get it done, well, sorry, we love you, but we're finding somebody who's a little bit better than you.
I was going to say, Micah, talk a little before we end this. Talk a little bit about how you guys attack the portal here. I don't think you're losing too many players, leaving Florida State to go somewhere. I could be wrong, but it seems like everyone wants to come to you, So talk a little bit about how you guys got to manage that. If people forget, you have your player meeting, and your player meetings are till the end of December, and the portal's already opened, right? And so you got to do a little balancing act there. And then with school starting, how are you going to get them in that quick? All that people forget. And then you have the May portal that just got concluded this past Friday. So talk to us a little bit about, the thought process here at Florida State with the portal under those type of, I don't say guidelines, but, those parameters.
Yeah. I mean, I think the portals became a bigger part of college athletics in general. like it or hate it, it's here. And I think we lost a lot of players to the pros in the last year, and a lot of that was because we had a great year, and we won a championship, and some of those players had finished up their eligibility. Some of them had some left and had great offers, and you have to take it. So everyone leaves at different times and for different reasons, and some players, maybe it's good just to play a couple years and go, right? If you get a great offer and you got a role where you're going to step into a starting spot or be in a good opportunity to win a starting spot, then that makes sense. So we knew we had some spots to fill, and I think at that point it's just looking for the best available players to fill those needs in the portal.
Yeah. Well, how much does the NIL help your recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, NIL, you hear a lot about NIL, right? You hear a lot that who knows, there's no database that you can go in and be like, this player is receiving this much NIL, right?
Right.
And so, I think people on the outside think it's a bigger thing than it is. I can tell you right now that all the players that we get, they could go somewhere else and get probably an offer that we could not match, right? You hear a lot of different things, and maybe those things that we hear, again, it's all third party information, so
right.
It's hard to tell. I don't think it's as big of a factor as people think it is currently in women's soccer, at least. I know it's gotten there in some other sports. It's certainly coming this way, but not as big. We're a non-revenue sport still.
Yeah. Do you think though it starts? You just alluded without naming schools. We can, I think, safely say maybe the ACC is more, compared to the SEC versus the Big Ten versus the Big 12 as far as where this NIL money is. What are your thoughts of maybe some insight to these 4 conferences in NIL?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, and this is all speculation on my part. I think some of the SEC schools, maybe because of the football money, and maybe some Big Ten schools you could lump in. The football money is better in the Big Ten and the SEC, right? So depending on how that school chooses to allocate their resources or their alumni base, they might have more than some ACC schools. So I'm not 100% sure about any of this stuff, but I do think there is. I would be surprised if the ACC was the top spender, but
yeah, I would agree with you probably on that because of the football comment, without a doubt. Evie, do you think the NIL is, they're going to have to, they need to do, I know you think they need to do something, but do you think anything's really going to happen?
No, because I don't think, Marcia and I were talking about this the other night. I don't think the NCAA has any teeth left. Right. I mean, they probably do in Olympic sports, right? And they probably do in basketball, but in football, it's like, dude, you think Mississippi gives a rat's ass about what the NCAA tells them? I don't think so. Because it's big time football. You think Michigan, like, yeah, okay. It's like the NCAA is like that bitchy dog that's like snapping at your ankles, but it's like, it's not gonna make any difference because there's too much money involved,
Yeah.
I don't, I don't think. I think 2 things. I think A, the NCAA doesn't have any teeth left. B, NIL is going through the Wild West stage right now. Because and Mike was right. I mean, you hear everything, but it's like, yeah, okay, it's the old, if you really got into it, you'd find out that there's a lot less there, and so I think that that's going through a phase. Will they ever do anything to get it under control? Maybe, but I don't see any indications that anybody's really doing anything, and kind of rightfully so, because if you don't think there's any rules, right, and there's nothing to back it up, okay, well, I'm gonna I'm going to go until they tell me to stop.
Or I'm going to sue you.
Yeah, or I'm going to sue you.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so okay, well, okay. I guess we went too far. Sorry. That kind of approach. And and again, I think it's an evolutionary thing that's going to work itself out eventually, but I don't know when, and I certainly don't know how.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I think
All
it's great.
right.
I think it's great for the players. I really do. I think it's
Yeah.
great for the players, right?
Yeah.
Because you know what? You got talent, you've worked hard. You've got an opportunity, somebody's going to throw money at you. There's very few of us in the world that would go, "No, thanks. I don't want any money."
Right.
I mean, you just don't do that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I hear you. Well, Micah, we thank you so much for being the guest here versus
before we go, Bone, before we go.
Okay. All right.
A family of 3 goalkeepers. Okay. Next time we have Micah on or one of his sisters, I want to know what goes on at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Right.
All right.
And they go out in the backyard, right, and prove who's the better goalkeeper. And poor Mrs. Bledsoe, because I've always said the worst position in sports is a goalkeeper's mom, or a goalie's mom. She had 3 of them.
Yeah. And any comment on that, Micah? I mean, maybe she calmed herself by playing the piano. Maybe that's I don't know. Yeah. What do you think?
She's pretty chill, I think there's definitely some moments where she's closing her eyes, but
yeah.
You should see. There's some videos of her, like Aubrey last year. When they won the semi in penalties, or maybe it was the quarterfinal. Could be wrong in those details, but there was someone filmed my mom during that, and she was kind of losing it for a little bit, and then once they won, the joy on her face was, can't repeplicate that.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
But I'd say as far as the competition piece, right? And Aubrey and I, especially when I was younger, I had a little bit more. I'd poke at her a little bit more maybe than I do now, as far as who's the better goalkeeper. But I would say I could never do the things that she was doing, right? But I'd still fancy myself if we had a little bit of a penalty shootout or something.
Yeah, you had to kick him out in the backyard. You can win.
Yeah, but Evie, he's gonna have
doing the dishes tonight.
He's gonna have that one thing she doesn't have.
Exactly.
That ring.
So far.
When's the ring coming, or they've already distributed them, or what?
We did get those. Yeah, we did get those.
Okay, all right. You're just not wearing it tonight to show the crowd?
No, not wearing that.
All 3 of us? No? Okay, not yet. All right, all good. All right, Evie, back to you, my friend.
Okay, well, Micah, thank you so much for taking time to join us, and congratulations on, not only the job, but the results in the national championship, and more importantly, most important of anything of those, being a new dad. That's great. That's that's wonderful. And but thank you for sharing your thoughts, and we appreciate it. And sorry that we're flying with only 2 engines tonight, but hopefully Pat Johnson will be back at some point, and hopefully Ryan got home safe. And thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It was great.
Okay, man.
All right.
Bone, talk to you later. See you guys later. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Ryan.
There we go.
All right.
Just hit that little red button.
Oh, here it is. All right. See you, Greg.
See you, Micah. Thanks again.
Thank you for watching and listening to the 3 Old Goalies podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media. And if you can, give us a 5-star review.